Welcome to Live from Mars. My name is Alex. You may know me as Mars from TikTok, Instagram, this podcast, wherever you found me, welcome. Live from Mars is your weekly go-to music podcast where you're going to get the latest and greatest in music updates, what's happening in the music industry, a special topic, a deep dive into one of your favorite albums, you name it. Our special deep dive for this week is that it's been 1 year since Taylor Swift's The Tortured Poets Department album was released last year on April 19th. I don't know how it's been a year because it simultaneously feels like this album happened yesterday, but it also feels like it's been 400 years since this album came out. I feel like Taylor and the fandom has lived 100 different lives while this album has been in existence. So we're going to do a big deep dive into the Tortured Poets Department. You guys sent in your questions via Instagram and voice memos, so I have a bunch of your questions that me and my special guest Nick are going to answer. Nick Palmai has been a guest on Live from Mars before. He joined me when we went through one of my favorite albums of 2024, which was Sabrina Carpenter's Short and Sweet. He did the entire interview live from his car because he screams music in the car, and I love his content. I'm a huge fan of his. He's become a great friend, so I'm excited to welcome him back to Live from Mars. And this is your weekly reminder, if you are not already subscribed to the podcast or following it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're consuming this content, I'd really appreciate it if you took the time to do so. And if you're feeling extra generous, throw Live from Mars a 5-star rating. It means the absolute world to me. That is how we get the podcast to grow and to have more exciting guests come on. And without any further ado, let's get into this week's episode of Live from Mars. Nick, welcome back to Live from Mars.
Thank you for having me again.
I am so happy to have you back. I know we were just talking before I hit record, just like it's been a while since I had a guest on here, so I'm excited to have you be the first guest back in about 2 months. And I'm excited for the banter we're going to have because I'm sure we're going to have some hot takes on this album. Yeah. In case you missed last week's episode, I am doing this deep dive into the Tortured Poets Department with Nick. He's a huge Swiftie. If you're not familiar with Nick, he does some incredible content across TikTok, Instagram, everywhere, where he screams the life out of your favorite songs in the car and pretty much embraces what we all are doing when we're driving in the car, as he is in his car right now, staying true to the bit, which I'm obsessed with. And we were just saying, like, I live in a city. I don't even have access to listen to music in a car. And that's like my favorite way of listening to new music is being in the car, driving around, like absorbing it properly. So I'm very jealous that you have it.
Yes.
It's the best. But we are here today talking about the Tortured Poets Department. It's crazy that it's been a year because it simultaneously feels like it's been a minute, but it also feels like it's been 500 years since this album came out. And all that has transpired since it came out that night in April last year.
Yeah, that was a wild night.
It
was
was
just like, it felt like a giant turmoil moment where it was just like, what is going on?
Right. And it was a late night. So were you up and listened to the full 31 songs? Like when the anthology dropped at 2 a.m., you stayed up and listened?
So I didn't stay up. When the album dropped, I stayed up to listen to the drop initially, and I did a listen through the album, like had a couple initial favorites, and then I'm like, I'll set an alarm for when it drops. And I remember waking up and I was just like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I'm so tired. I have to go to sleep.
Another 15 songs to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exhausting is the word that I described.
Exhausting, overwhelming. You're like excited, but you're also like, oh my God, I can't do this right now.
I think I don't remember exactly what happened the night of, but I remember being like, I don't think I can do this right now.
Yeah.
I listened to the first 16 and I guess I finished at like 1 something in the morning, and I was recording, I was doing my reactions, and I'm like, I'm fucking exhausted. I have to work tomorrow. Like, I got to go to bed. I know there's something coming at 2 a.m., but like, I'll just see it in the morning. You know, I don't need to be focusing on it right now. And what do you know? 15 more songs. And I woke up that next morning being like, shit, that's a lot more to consume and go through. It was like a
complete second album, and I'm already trying to process what I just listened to. And I'm like, I have to listen to more. Like, I don't even know what I just listened to. I'm trying to dissect it and figure it out. And now I have all of this. It just was like overwhelming.
Oh yeah, overwhelming to say the least. Last week, I asked you guys to send in your biggest hot takes, your dying questions you're wanting to know the answers from myself and Nick about Tortured Poets, whether we think it's a good album, a bad album, what our favorite songs are, if we think that the Jack portion is better than the Aaron portion or vice versa. And there's a lot of questions that you guys sent in. This actually leads into the first one perfectly. At Tal Reputation 33 asked about how the timing of the anthology's release impacted our perception of the Tortured Poets Department as as a whole. If it was released a week after the original 16, would it have been better appreciated?
I think I agree with them in that sense because it all was so fast paced. And in my brain, they're two separate albums almost. Not completely, but they felt like we just got one album and now here's another album to listen to. And so I feel like if it did happen the week later, you would have had the time to already process the beginning chunk of the album because it was such like a storytelling album of like the past 7 years. And then you kind of have the curveball of like, oh, it's not about the past 7 years of this relationship she was in. It's also about this relationship she was in for 2 weeks. And I
Right.
feel like you didn't get to digest the parts separately enough to fully take it all in. Like, I think I spent more time on the first half than the second half overall
Totally.
completely because the second half it was just so overwhelming. That's
Yeah.
just the word.
Completely overwhelming. I completely agree. I think that releasing the anthology 2 hours later did more harm than good. I mean, as a whole, like, I guess to get this out of the way, where are you on the Tortured Poets department as an album? Now it's been a year. How does this sit with you? Do you love the album? You like it? You think it's okay? You think it's not great? I guess, how does it rank within Taylor's greater discography for you? Because I feel like that's going to be a big tell as to where the conversation's going to go.
Yeah, I think it's a good Taylor Swift album. Like, it showcases her storytelling a lot. Like, you get a lot longer tracks and like she gets very intricate with the details and like she always does where it like makes you really think about like what is she trying to actually say right here.
Right.
But when it comes to the Tortured Poets department as a whole, the second half to me doesn't feel like it's a traditional part of the album. And so it kind of feels a little messy to me in a sense. They don't feel like they all belong in the same project. And I feel like when you get to the second half of the album, a lot of it mixes and mingles in with each other. And you kind of get all like, I feel like I'm listening to the same thing a couple times
Yep.
based on the second half. You know, you hear one song and you're like, okay, great. And then you get to another song of like 2 songs later and you're like, maybe I just listened to this,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. I think you're hitting the nail on the head. That I completely agree with you. I've had like a very difficult relationship with this album because I think there was just so much built up hype going into it that Midnights for me was a big, in the end, a disappointment, transparently. Like, I am not a
Right.
Midnight Soup fan. I think that there are maybe 3 or 4 songs I go back to, but it's probably my least revisited Taylor album. And I think coming after something as big and monumental and a reset like Folklore and Evermore were, she kind of went so far in the other direction to be back in those pop roots to prove that you are a capital P pop star. Midnights did not sit well with me. So when Tortured Poets was announced and we knew that Jack and Aaron were back on it and you saw the track titles and it felt, based on the aesthetic and all of it, that it was going to be a kind of blend of like the Folklore Evermore world meeting with the pop forward production and pop forward messaging that Taylor works with, it kind of caused like an existential crisis for me as a Taylor fan because it's now like the second album in a row that I wasn't in love with.
Yeah.
And over the last few days, I've been re-listening to the album and I've re-fallen back in love with the songs that I loved so much when the album first came out and that I've held on to, but it only further cemented to me the issues that I have with the album as a whole and the songs I really dislike. So that's, I guess, the high level overview of where I'm at with TTPD as of right now. But to go back to the question, I think that the dual drop of the two dampened the perception of the original 16 because
Yeah.
if you listen to the original 16, like there are some great Taylor moments in here. And I think as a 16 song body of work, it's strong. It's a good Taylor Swift album. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
a great Taylor Swift album because there are issues that I have with repetitive production and songwriting, which I'll get into. But the anthology only further proved the issues that I had with the standard 16, that it felt like a bit of a run on if they repeat the same narrative ideas that have been explored previously and in better ways. And I almost think it would have been better if she released the anthology, not 2 hours after. A week later still feels too soon. If you did it how like Ari treated the 1 year anniversary of Eternal Sunshine with the deluxe edition, that to me would maybe feel a little bit better because the deluxe edition is really fan service at its core. And I know this isn't a quote deluxe edition, but like it pretty much is.
Yeah. I think having all of it at once was a lot for everyone. It seemed like that was the general consensus for the most part. Like everyone's obviously excited because it's like, oh my God, 31 new Taylor Swift songs. But
Right.
even looking at the album a year later, I look at the first half of the album and the second half of the album, and I'm like, you could cut 40% of each of these and blend them together for like a slightly shorter album, but still a long album that
Yeah.
is much more concise and like gets the point across the exact same way, but without all the extra noise that may feel a little unnecessary. And I feel like she could have just built a stronger album as a whole using those instead of being like, here's all of it at
Yeah.
once.
Totally. Totally. So I guess this takes us to our next question. We had talked very briefly about this earlier. What our ideal album rollout would be for the Tortured Poets Department, because we're clearly saying that releasing the anthology 2 hours later was not the right move.
Yeah.
So I broke this down, and if you have it fleshed out like this, go for it. If not, just give me your free flowing thoughts of your dream rollout for this project, from teaser / announcement of the project to what that lead single is, a second single, a third single, if you have it in mind. What is your way of going in and kind of fixing the issues?
Yeah, so I thought a little bit about like how I would roll it out, and I honestly thought about it like just on my own, like how would I do Taylor Swift singles if I was rolling out a Taylor Swift album? And I kind of feel like I do that with lots of my favorite artist albums.
It's
Once
my
the full
favorite thing.
project drops,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, why wasn't this first? But then sometimes you're like, okay, I get why it wasn't first and this was first, but this
Right.
could have also been just as good. I miss traditional album rollouts, and we see them not as much anymore. Like obviously with the newcomers and like the current mainstream pop people, you see the lead single and then the rollout of the whole album. But with the bigger artists lately, you're seeing a lot of like, here it is all at once. Where
Right.
I appreciate the lead up to an era where you get little tidbits of it and you get teasers. I think that adds to the fun of it. And
Yeah.
when it all drops at once, it is overwhelming. And so I would have loved to see her do a lead single for the album. And before, because we had no idea that the album was going to include the stint of the 2-week relationship with Maddie Healy. We all expected it to be the full storybook of Joe Alwyn.
Yes.
And
that is
when
like the biggest thing that I feel like is not talked about or emphasized enough, is that when this album was announced, there was like everyone knew in their minds that this album was going to be about the end of her 6-year relationship with Joe Alwyn.
yeah.
And then the biggest surprise of anything was not that there was a whole 15 other songs to go through, but that this album was about the 6-week relationship with Maddie Healy. That was shocking.
And it was like, I feel like you'd be almost more offended that you were like, I just spent 6 years and I didn't get an album. I got a couple songs, and then this guy for a couple weeks got the whole thing. And so
Yeah.
I feel like I would have picked as a lead single, if she was doing a traditional rollout, the first single would have been My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys, because it would immediately kind of confuse people, because you're like, this is about Joe. And even now when I listen to the song, I can't tell who it's about. And I think that would set like a good tone of people being like, what are we about to get? And like kind of drop a little hint in there.
Yep.
And then for a second single, I don't know. Like with the album dropping, I feel like you want another kind of like exciting song, but I love So Long London so much. I feel like that needed its own moment to have like, pay attention to this, listen to this, because it's such, the song itself and the production is so like whimsy and like haunting, where like when it just starts out, it just feels like this is going to be deep, and then it is. So I feel like that would have been a good song to highlight, at least with a second or even third single. And then this is just a personal favorite, but I would have loved to see Guilty as Sin as a third single. I think that would have been received so well by the general public. And I kind of love that. And I feel like to wrap it all up, like for a fourth single, because she doesn't really go deeper than 4, honestly, kind of even 3 nowadays.
But
I think
like 1 for this, 2 for
yeah,
this.
like I Can Do It With a Broken Heart would have been the perfect like finale to the album, because it had such a moment on the tour. Everyone loved that. It was like a fun little bop, and she released a tour video for it, and it just made sense. It just didn't really get the full single treatment it could have had.
It didn't get any treatment. It got the B movie treatment. It really like drives me crazy how little time and seemingly effort were put into the visual component of this album, because her songwriting is so deeply visual that the only visual you get for this entire album is the Fortnite music video, essentially. And then the photo shoot is just her looking moody with a bunch of black, gray, or white backgrounds. Like, there's no Victorian kind of poet energy here. There's none of these like intense candelabras and chandeliers and Victorian kind of 1800s outfits to play into this tortured poet aesthetic with the typewriters and everything. And that to me is a huge miss for the album, and why I have like a difficult time connecting with it is because the visual component is so MIA. And like for I Can Do It With a Broken Heart to be delegated to the tour music video of like the behind the scenes, that's what she did for like a 6th or a 7th single from an album like a Red or a 1989 or a Speak Now back in the day. That was like, if you wanted to juice one last single out of an album that had already kind of run its course, you throw in a behind the scenes or a tour performance music video and call it a day. And that's exactly what they did for a song that had so much potential. What I would have loved to see explored further is the scene of the Fortnite music video where you're in this mental hospital or mental asylum, whatever it is, and like maybe the next music video for So Long London is her in this mental hospital going into a different room of the hospital. And in that room is like a sensory deprivation chamber. I'm thinking of what like 11 goes through on Stranger Things, because that's like the visual coming to mind.
Yeah.
In this sensory deprivation tank, she's floating in the middle of the ocean and like trying to weather the storm. And I'm thinking of
Yeah.
the scene from the Cardigan video of her in the middle of the ocean with the piano holding on for dear life. Like exploring different rooms of the mental hospital, I think could have been a really intriguing idea. And that actually goes directly into my way of changing this album rollout.
Mhm.
So back to how like Midnight's had that trailer that came out, I would have loved to time when she announced Tortured Poets at the Grammys. That move I didn't like at all. Like you could visibly see people in the audience be like, oh my God, another album.
Yeah.
But if you're going to time it with that, I get it.
Mhm.
I would have wanted a teaser trailer essentially that combines clips of different music videos that were maybe pre-filmed. But granted, like, have to remember the Eras Tour is happening simultaneously. There's not so much time, but this video would have included instrumentals of So Long London, But Daddy I Love Him, The Black Dog, and then it
Yes.
fades to black, and the April 19th, 2024 date is on the screen. When that drops,
Yeah.
she posts that on socials Sunday night. Monday morning, post the album cover, lead single coming out Friday. So you're building that week with excitement and anticipation of if any of the instrumentals you heard in that trailer are going to be the lead
Yeah.
single. My pick for the lead single, I am so torn between what you said, My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys, and So
Yep.
Long London. I
Okay.
chose to go with So Long London because, to your point, there was already interest in this album being the breakup album of this 6 year long relationship. This is very on the nose, obviously. Or maybe it's a lead single, maybe it's a promo single, whatever you want to call it, but
Yep.
it's a way of building hype. So Long London kind of gets that story out of the way, and it's a killer song. I think it's one of, if not the best song on the album as a whole. And the music video, it could just be so visually enticing. I like picture the entire thing in my head. And then when the album is
I, for some
actually,
reason, picture it on a train. I don't know why. I'm like associating London with trains, and it opens like her looking out the window, and then it's just like the Tortured Poets Taylor, where she's a little like going a little
yeah,
wild, and she just destroys the train on her way out of town. I would love to
yeah,
see something like that.
right. But like the writing is so visual in itself, like the two graves, one gun. The story is all there for you.
Mhm.
So that feels like a missed opportunity to me. But then with the release of the album, I would love to do My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys because like, and this also could have been the opening song on the album instead of Fortnite, because introducing this world by going, oh, here we go again. Like
Yes.
it works
And
so
playing
well.
off your teaser that you were talking about, like if using both single choices that we had, because we both said So Long London or My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys, whether
Yeah.
they're switched or not, I would have used like a teaser even to tease, like if I was gonna do My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys the lead, use the beginning of So Long London as like, and like have the clip of her on the train that we have in our brain, and then it just like shuts down when like the So Long London parts, and then you just hear at the end the date flashes, you hear here we go again, and then
Yeah.
slams, trailer done, and then you're like shoot. And then if it
Right.
was either single, it's like here's one, and then now you know why that was the teaser,
Right.
because you're getting the next one.
I love that. And then I agree with you. I think at a later point as a third single, or if you're going to wrap up the era, I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. I think that is the most pop friendly, like radio friendly song on the album. It's hard to tell if Fortnite did as well as it did on radio and streaming because it was the lead single of a Taylor Swift album at the seemingly second peak of her career, or if it
Yeah,
was actually because people loved the song so much. I loved the song. I know a lot of people don't have positive
I
feelings.
also love Fortnite.
Yeah, like I don't necessarily need to hear more of it, but I really enjoy it as an opener, as what it does for the album. And I think I Can Do It With a Broken Heart deserves a better visual than the behind the scenes tour film that we got. I love that we both thought like very similar things to this.
Yeah. We had a vision.
Yeah, I love that. So, all right, let's go to the next question. So, Ariana Moonlight Girl said, do you prefer the Jack synthier moments of the album or the Aaron minimalist moments on the album? And what are your thoughts on the production on the album as a whole?
I think I prefer the Jack side of it only because the Aaron side of it is where I feel more run on happens, where it's
Right.
like it just feels like a continuous song. But with Jack, there's like more ups and downs. And
I'm
I'm
okay with
also just in general a more like upbeat pop person.
the original album proper is very much more Jack than Aaron. The
Mhm.
anthology leans way more heavily Aaron than Jack. So to simply answer the question, my answer is I prefer the Jack stuff. But
Yeah.
if you're looking at the songs on the album proper that Aaron did, they are So Long London, which I feel like so many people think is a Jack production because it's upbeat and has that propulsive dance beat in the back, but
Yeah.
that's an Aaron one.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about how much we both love that one, but Daddy I Love Him I think is the best song on this album, and that one is made with Taylor, Jack, and Aaron. So like
Yeah. The
meeting
perfect
the
mix of
world.
all of them.
And then Aaron did LOML, which is stunning. Like I still think that that song is one of the best heart-wrenching ballads she's ever written. And then
Definitely.
he did The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived and Clarabelle. So I
Clarabelle is one of my favorites, so that also leans into
right,
like I lean over here, but there's certain ones where it's like, no, this song is incredible. Like I'm obsessed with it.
right. It's tough because I think for so long I held Aaron on such a high pedestal because of the work on Folklore and Evermore, and Folklore being my favorite album of Taylor's ever. And that style, I've always dreamed she would make an album like Folklore and never thought she would. So that's why I hold their partnership so tight to my chest.
Yeah.
I think the distaste that I have towards the anthology is largely associated with the Aaron work. So that's why I say the Jack side of it for this.
Okay, fair enough.
But my issue still with the album is that you actually mentioned it very early on in the conversation that a lot of this album is repetitive, that these are similar production styles over and over again, both within the album itself and calling back to other songs that Taylor and Jack, Taylor and Aaron, the three of them have done together. I feel like there are better versions of the songs that I don't care for on Tortured Poets on other Taylor albums, and I'd rather listen to them
Oh
than this
yeah.
like B tier song when you have like the A tier song waiting for you in the wings. Even the Jack stuff on the album proper and on the anthology is still not in my mind the best work that Taylor and Jack have done together. That to
Mhm.
me resides in Cruel Summer and Getaway Car and August. And there's so many people who are like, Taylor needs to get away from Jack. He's forcing her to do the same thing over and over again. It's the same production. It's stale. I don't disagree that I think she could use time with another producer to learn from them because she's been working with Jack religiously since 2014, since 1989 and
Yeah.
onward. But Jack's not forcing Taylor to do anything. Taylor is the one in charge
No.
of everything. She is the one
Yes.
calling the shots. And if he gave her a production on a song that she didn't care for, she's going to tell him that she doesn't like it. So no one's
Yeah.
forcing her to do this. And in terms of it being repetitive, you hear a song like Jack did with Lana with like a Venice Bitch A&W type thing. And then you hear a song like Margaret on Do You Know There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard. There's very much different sonic palettes being approached in Lana's career and Jack's work with Bleachers and other artists versus the Taylor stuff. So like it's not Jack's fault, I want to say.
Yeah. Even him, he produced Please, Please, Please. That's very
Right.
different. Like it could fit in a Taylor Swift world for sure, but
Totally.
you don't have a song in Taylor Swift's work with Jack to compare to a song like Please, Please, Please.
Exactly.
I feel like with her relationship with Jack, she's comfortable. She trusts him. She loves that they work well together. But part of me feels like not that we've heard enough from them. I love them together, and I think they can always somehow work together on albums. But I think she's gone as far down the hallway with Jack at this point as she can.
They have a song like False God. That
Love
is
that song so
my
much.
favorite song on Lover. It's like top 5 in her discography for me.
Yes.
It was my surprise song. Like I'll never get past that song. And that's something completely net new different. There's not a single other song in her discography that sounds anything remotely close to that one. I've said this in a few other conversations about Taylor and where she's at in her career and about this album, that the songs of Taylor's that I'm gravitating towards at this point in my life, being a fan of hers, like a die-hard ride or die fan for 12, 13 years now. I would say Red was like my real starting point. The
Okay.
songs
Mine
of
will
hers
speak
that
now. Yep.
the songs of hers that I'm loving and returning to are the songs that feel like there's nothing else like them in her discography because, as we discussed, so much of this album feels repetitive. And the
Yes.
songs on Tortured Poets that don't sound anything like anything else are Jack songs. And those are Fresh Out the Slammer, Florida. You have I Can Fix Him, No Really I Can. You have The Black Dog. I Look in People's Windows. That one to me is like top 5 on Tortured Poets that no one talks about. I Look in People's Windows. It's
That
creepy.
song was one for me where it's like in the beginning, it didn't stand out right away, but then you actually like digest the lyrics and you're like, this is such an interesting listen. It's one of those ones that throws you off at first where you're like not sure
Yep.
what she's actually meaning by these lyrics. You're like, what do you mean you're looking in people's windows? And then when you fully like submerge yourself into it, you're like, oh, okay, now I'm following. And it's just, I love when a song does that. When you think it's one thing and then you listen to it a few more times and you're like, oh, this is just like, she's using it as a metaphor. You know, I
Yeah.
love that.
Well, that takes us to one of the questions that was sent in by at Augustine's Bracelets. Which song grew on you the most? I take it that's your answer.
No, actually.
Oh, go
The
for it.
song that grew on me the most was the Albatross.
Really?
because it was, yes, it was like I obviously heard it when I listened to the album, but it was one of those ones where I never revisited it really. And then one day it just came on when I was listening to the album, and I just fell in love with the production. It was like, it just, again, it was one of those Taylor Swift songs that feels haunting in a way. Just the way it like goes up and down. I just love it. It just feels like a journey.
I hate to do this, but I hate that song. I
That's
hate it.
fine. I know that it's not
Oh,
well loved, but that was one that grew on me, and I was
that's
surprised
fair. It's
myself.
fair. The melody, I just can't do, like the da 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 da
That's the
da
part
da.
that I love.
I can't. I can't. But like that just speaks to the power of the music. Like everyone can
Yeah.
latch onto something different. That is one that I cannot go back to. The song that probably grew on me the most from the Tortured Poets department from first to listen to today, I think is Fresh Out the Slammer. And
Okay. Yeah.
it
Fair.
feels weird to me that like over the last few weeks, Swifties have been kind of rallying to try to make this the next single off of the album without any
Yeah.
label or Taylor support whatsoever. I'm like, power to
Yes.
you guys, because the song in my eyes deserves it. But this song, after going from tracks 1 through 6, and once you finish a song like But Daddy, I Love Him, that is so strong across the album, her entire discography. Fresh Out the Slammer was like a woozy, hypnotic, like desert like moment that I wasn't expecting. And it felt
And I
like a
don't want to
real
say
drag.
country, but it gives Western. Does that make
Exactly.
sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the guitar in the intro.
Yeah.
And it's very much a Western influence, and I just usually don't gravitate towards that stuff. So when I was first listening to the album a few times, I was like, why is there such a doozy between But Daddy, I Love Him being such a euphoric high moment, and then you get into track 8, Florida, which is like crazy balls to the wall. It kind of got skipped over, and then I Can Fix Him No Really I Can kind of felt like a similar song where it was
Yeah.
very offbeat, not at all what I was expecting, and so sluggish. And you're like moving through quicksand to try to get through it. And it felt like a labor to listen to it. And those two songs have been the ones I've been really returning back to more, just because I'm giving them the space that they need and the time to like sink in, I guess.
Yeah. And going back to what you said about going from a song like But Daddy, I Love Him to that, it's like you're not in the mood for something like that if you were just really into But Daddy, I Love Him. I feel like if it was placed differently on the album, it would have been recognized sooner. Like it was, I don't want to say it was a skip for me from the beginning, but it was just one that was like, I'm not in the mood for this type of song right now.
Yep.
But that song has a specific place.
Has a
I've loved
big
seeing the
moment.
renaissance of Fresh Out the Slammer, but
Yeah.
I have a friend, her name's Shannon, and you might know her from TikTok. I can't remember her.
Shout out Shannon.
Is she No Body No Crime? She might be. I think she got that
Yeah.
username back when it dropped, but she has been a Fresh Out the Slammer truther from the jump, and she is just thriving right now that everyone's jumping on the train.
Like finally everyone woke up.
Yes,
Yeah.
literally.
So another fan question, this one sent in through voice memo. Ethan sent in a
Ooh.
question. Take it away, Ethan.
Hi, my name is Ethan, and for the Torture Poets Department, I believe it shouldn't have been nominated for Album of the Year. Why do you think it was nominated for Album of the Year?
His hot take is that the Tortured Poets department should not have been nominated for Album of the Year. Why do we think it was?
I never really understand the Academy's way of choosing who they want to nominate, because sometimes you're like, they want big culture moments like that really impacted the music industry, but then you also get the wild card sometimes where you're like, what is this album, where you like, like the year Beck won Album of the Year, there was so many people in the pop culture world that were like,
what
who is that?
exactly?
And so you never really know how they pick and choose, but obviously, in a sense, you think, well, she's Taylor Swift. Everyone knows she's incredibly talented. She's an incredible songwriter, and the Grammys value songwriting a lot. But I do think, in a sense, that the Tortured Poet. How many times have I messed that up during this? The Tortured Poets Department.
It's not easy.
Yeah, in combination with the Eras Tour, gave it that big, impactful moment that the Grammys love to showcase. And so I think it did deserve a nomination, but don't come for me. I never thought it was going to win. I didn't think it was going to be a winning moment. I was just like, they want to respect Taylor Swift and the album, that it was a great body of work. We want to acknowledge her, but I don't think it should have won, and it didn't. So it makes sense to me.
Completely agree with you. The album was nominated for Album of the Year because of a few things. One, it's Taylor Swift. And this isn't the same as saying back when Reputation and Lover weren't nominated in the general field. Like, this is a very different time. It's a very different Taylor. She is spearheading the industry. She is the music industry. Yep. And for an album that sold 2.6 million copies in its first week, there was no chance that this wasn't going to be a potential contender for Album of the Year. So if it was completely an awful album and it got terrible reviews, that's a very different story. It maybe one of her lowest ranked albums on Metacritic, and critically, it may be the most polarizing reviewed album of her career in the last at least decade. People are returning to the Tortured Poets department and maybe realizing we judged this a little too harshly when it first came out because it was too overwhelming when it dropped with the 31 songs, or because it
Yes.
was a commentary on Taylor as a celebrity rather than Taylor the musician. People looked for an opportunity to kind of tear her down. Taylor fatigue was very much tangible. And the album is still a good album. It's a great album that any other artist, the worst song on the Tortured Poets department would be one of another artist's best, most successful moments. We just
Yes.
hold Taylor to such a high standard because we've seen how strong of an artist she can be in different moments that when she's not, it hits a little bit harder because you're used to holding someone to such a high standard. So
Yeah, and I think as a whole, the Torture Poets Department is a great album. But in short, there is an incredible album hidden in the Torture Poets Department as a whole.
right. Well, it also speaks that she submitted the album proper, the 16 songs, not the entire 31
Yes.
anthology. But when you're looking at prior Taylor albums that were nominated and won, I'm talking the winning albums are Fearless, Folklore, and Midnights. This is definitely a stronger album than Midnights. I still do not think that Midnights deserved to win Album of the Year that year. It very much, I think it should have gone to SZA's SOS that year. That's
Oh,
my
okay. I was
opinion.
like, I was trying to think of who else was nominated, and I was like, was that the SOS year? Because I
It
really
was
wanted
SOS.
SZA to take home an Album of the Year. But
Yeah,
I
like,
knew Midnights was such a huge moment, and again with the Eras tour, just it was a cultural moment that the Grammys had to be like, yes, this
right.
was. There was nothing bigger than this.
Looking at Tortured Poets, it's a stronger album than Midnights, but this album did not deserve to win Album of the Year, and it's right that it didn't and that it lost to Beyonce. And also, like, this year's category was so jam-packed between Taylor,
Yes.
Beyonce, Chapel, Charlie, Sabrina. Like, there were heavy-ass hitters in this category that this is not your Folklore, this is not a Fearless that deserved it, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Okay, so some like track list game questions that came through. At
Ooh,
Charlie
okay.
Guzman and Raid asked, if you have to eliminate one song from the track list for good, which would it be and why?
Oh, Robin, I just never listened to it.
I don't either.
And when it first came out, the name ones all confused me. I'm like, there's so many names on this track
So
list.
many names. And like that's a huge piece of this is the song titles are so duplicative between Cassandra, Peter, Robin, Chloe or Sam or Sophia or
The
Marcus.
one, yeah, with the 3 different names. It's like, dude,
There's
this
so
is
many
too many
names.
things.
And then you have the Bolter, the Albatross, the Black Dog, the Prophecy,
Yes.
the Manuscript.
Yeah.
It's just like a lot of the same, which contributed to being confused as to like, what song am I listening to right now? So yeah, they blend.
Who's
I think
speaking
that's
to me
good.
right now?
Yeah. I don't think I've ever listened to Robin in full. I think I listened past the first chorus and I'm like, okay,
I
next.
don't think I couldn't literally sing a line, tell you a line of that song other than I'm sure at some point she says Robin, or maybe she says it once. I honestly don't know.
No harm done. Yeah. That is a great choice. My choice is Thank You, Amy.
Okay, I kind of like Thank You, Amy, but I was kind of drawn in by the lore. It's not like one of my favorite songs ever, but I can appreciate it.
I don't like the song itself. I don't like the writing. I don't like the production. I think it's too whimsical for something that's supposed to be catty. I also feel like this song should have been on Midnights. It feels like another jab and another iteration of the same story that I've heard so many times across Reputation, Midnight's moments, Folklore, Evermore moments. Like it's just too much of this same story that isn't really relevant anymore. And listen, I get it. If she's clearly holding on to ill will and like traumatized probably from what happened in 2016, you don't really get past that. I understand it. We've all had difficult shit that stays in the back of your head and you're never really fully going to get over. But if Midnight's the whole point of it is revisiting these 13 sleepless nights throughout her life, it feels like a better placement for it.
But part of me is also like, yeah, whack him again. Why not? Like part of Taylor Swift in general, I think she's at a point in her career where she can do whatever the hell she wants.
Right.
And I feel like she is like, my fans want everything. So I'm going to give them everything that I have ready. Let's go. Let's do it. But I feel like because she's Taylor Swift, she could do that in a way that doesn't take away from the bulk of the album. So I feel like we spoke about before, a year later, long after, or even she loves a web store exclusive, give the fans who really, really care, like the mega Swifties that want everything, put it as a digital exclusive, give it to them, do a physical release later.
You woke something up in me. It kind of goes back to like how we're feeling about this album, and it's actually the question I was going to save for the end, but you know what? I'll save it for the end. I'll keep everybody on their toes. We'll come back to that because That's a good one. All right, so a game I like to play, the series I used to do on TikTok, best worst fave, where you say what you
Yes.
think the best song is, the worst song, and your personal favorite song on the album is. Nick, best worst fave, Tortured Poets Department. Give me what you think the best, worst, and favorite songs are on this album.
Best, worst, fave, Tortured Poets Department. Best, So Long London. Incredible song. The production, the storytelling, the way it, like, you can visualize everything when you're listening to it. Love it. Perfect. Favorite, Guilty as Sin from the jump. That was always my favorite song. I could listen to that over and over and over again. Obsessed with it. But the worst, probably Robin, because as I've said, I couldn't tell you anything about that song other than that it's called Robin.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
My best worst fave picks for the Tortured Poets Department. Best, I've always, since pretty much it came out, been torn between two, and we've discussed them ad nauseum today. It's So Long London and But Daddy, I Love Him. For the purposes of picking one, I'm going to agree with you, So Long London. I think But Daddy, I Love Him is like a stronger song in that it reminds me of Fearless a lot. It reminds me of her country days. It reminds me of the forbidden love narrative of a love story, Romeo and Juliet. Like, no one wants her to be with this guy, but she doesn't care. She wants to be with him anyway. It's sprawling. It's like a cinematic, epic 5-minute long song. But So Long London for me has to be the best song on this album. We've talked about it. The worst song to me is Thank You, Amy, because it just gives me such an ick. But Robin is the perfect choice as well because it's so just like forgettable. Sorry if you're a Robin stan.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen any of them. So if you're there, show us. Show your face.
I have, and I don't get it. Yeah.
I mean, sorry, not really, but like, sorry to the Robin stans.
Each their own. Each their own. And then my favorite song.
I have a tattoo that says that.
My favorite song, I think, is consistently I Look in People's Windows because it's so strange and random.
It is so strange.
But I just love how it's so like Hitchcockian, Rear Window, creepy, crawly, but masked by this like beautiful kind of fairy tale production, like very minimalist. So I really love that one. But then a few others that I love.
It's like an eerie feel to it almost.
Yeah. A few others that I've been still loving are the title track, which is a great example of what I love and hate about this album. An issue that I have with the writing across a lot of the record is that it goes an extra step than what's needed. You get an extra description that goes on for a little bit too long. This run-on style of songwriting for Taylor, I think she's better when she's a little bit more edited, has a little bit more of like a melody that she's trying to write to, or a more strict song structure. And on the Tortured Poets Department, the title song, it is a perfect example, specifically the lyric where it's, you took my ring off my middle finger and put it on the one people put wedding rings on, and that's the closest I've come from my heart exploding. If she ended the sentence at, you took the ring off my middle finger and put it on the one,
it has more shock punch value to it.
It has more shock and punch value. It has more shock value to it, and it's, you know what she's talking about when this album being about this all-consuming love that she spent a decade of her life going after this man, and the timing never worked out, and they finally got together, and she was so unbelievably infatuated with him, and to the point that she was borderline delusional about what people were saying about him and kind of ignoring the warning signs, eventually being woken up to realize he's a pretty shitty guy in the end. I mean, the smallest man who ever lived is scathing. That when you're writing about taking your ring off your middle finger and putting it on the one, it's so evident what she's talking about that going the extra step of explaining it goes against everything that I've loved about her as a writer, where she is succinct and clear in her messaging. You know exactly what she's talking about without giving every single tiny little detail possible that doesn't need to be over explained. And with all that said, I love the song. I didn't love it when it first came out, but I've loved that one since, and I keep returning to it. It's funny when I tell people I have an issue with that song, they're like, oh, the Charlie Puth the chocolate lyric. I'm like, no, I love that lyric because that's 100% an actual conversation that the two of them had.
Yeah. So, like, you're high and you're like, oh my God, Charlie Puth is so good. Like, that's just a funny moment.
So true.
And even going back to like the line where you said, if she just made the ring line a little more concise, odds are 99% of people are going to get it immediately. But that's a fun moment for those people that don't, when they're on their second or third listen, where they're like, what? If they didn't catch it the first time, then it's like, well, that's what she meant. Like, I can't believe he did that. You know, it's one of those storytelling moments where it's like, you only get your Taylor Swift life information from her lyrics. And that run-on sentence is just like, okay, I get it. There's too many details now.
Yeah, exactly. And it actually reminds me of the issue with like the Albatross. Sorry. Lyrics are saying the same thing over and over and over again in different words, but it's the same message repeated over again. Like, that's where I get stuck on this album, is like you have such high highs, but then the lows are not so low, but they just make things feel a little bit soggy to me. And that takes me to the question that I wanted to ask in the end, is our closing, is what has stuck with you the most after a year of having this album, and how that leads to like where you're living with the album now, what your thoughts are on it from a stance of longevity, the culture surrounding it, the lasting impact it's had.
Yeah. So I think like a year later, looking back at the album, like a good chunk of the songs on the album I really enjoy. I love that I go back to them often, but there's also a good chunk of the album that I just don't. And like I have my picked and chosen favorites and I revisit those ones all the time. But unless I'm going back into the album, I'm only revisiting like my favorite ones that I have saved. Still, the first half of the album is my favorite for me. And then I have like a very concise list of ones that I pick and choose from the second half of the album. But even playing off of what we just said about the album kind of being like chaos because there's so much going on and a little messy. As we were speaking about it, I'm like, you know what? In a way, that is kind of what she is trying to get across. And maybe that was her thought process when doing such a long album where it was like, you're getting all the turmoil in my brain. Like I was going through it. This was like, I was repetitive. I was like saying the same things over and over again. This was a lot. Like this was overwhelming. Here it all is. So in a way, I'm like, maybe that was her point of the album. Like, I want you to feel chaos. I want you to feel overwhelmed. I want you to really like hear every little detail and like try to take it in. But I think certain people that will land with and certain people that will not.
What you mentioned earlier that made me want to put this question towards the end was the multiple versions.
Mm-hmm.
I think that where I'm at with the Tortured Poets department a year later is I'm very torn on it still because of all the things we've already described in terms of like the inconsistencies with writing quality or repetitive production, but then having such killer moments that are all-time greats in her discography. I think transparently the commercial aspect of this album really put a bad taste in my mouth, and many others, that like every single week there being a different digital version. When you mentioned that, it completely woke that memory up inside of me that I forgot I had, where I remember with like there were constant chart battles. I remember when Brat came out, she released exclusive versions of the Tortured Poets department digitally in the UK store only because Charlie was going to debut at #1 in the UK. And I'm like, come on. Like every single week there being a different version of it. And it was usually in competition to retain the #1 spot, to have the longest run at #1 of any album she's ever had. And that did ultimately happen. It was #1 for many, 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 I think 13, 14, 15 weeks. I forget the number exactly. But the way that she got it to do that was so icky to me.
I kind of think it devalues the album in a way because then they're like dogpiled with all these other things and you're like, what is going on? Like I just want the album. I don't need all the extras.
Totally.
And so for me, they fall flat, and her doing so many, it's almost, as you said, it was like she's taking the #1, but it's like she knows it's going to happen because the fans are going to buy whatever she sells you.
Right. They were so much of an emphasis on legacy and numbers and metrics and charts. And I kind of hoped at this point, like she sold 2.6 million copies in her first week with, 5 different vinyl variants, which like today's world is kind of normal. That to me was like the biggest chart accomplishment you could really ask for. The need to continue it kind of felt like it was pushing the album to be a longer lasting moment than it actually really was. It was kind of forced down people's throats after it came out, when it wasn't actually revealing where people were at with Taylor with the music at that point. So that's where I'm kind of at, where like there's still quality to dig through here. It's a great album. It's a good Taylor Swift album. There's a difference there. And it's just not one that I consistently return to much. There are the same few songs I go back to, but it's very, very different for me. My experience with this album and Midnights together versus my experience with Folklore, Evermore, Lover, Reputation, 1989, Red. The surround sound puts such a damper on it for me.
Yeah. When I'm going back to Tortured Poets department, it's like I have one song that I'm like, I really want to listen to this song right now. And then you go back and then I go in, you get into the album, but I'm still only listening to my favorites.
Right.
I'm not listening to it in full unless I'm listening to it on vinyl. But then again, I'm like, this is too much flipping.
So much
too
flipping.
Many songs here.
I mean, the anthology up here, I think I've spun maybe like once or twice because it's 8 sides.
The era was so concise.
I know.
It didn't really feel like it's been a year, but it was like, really?
Yeah.
It came out a year ago, but it didn't feel like in a typical standard Taylor Swift era, a year in, we're still like fully in an era.
Right.
Like think of 1989, and I get she was on the biggest tour ever, so like she did not really have time to invest in a full era and go do all the stuff you typically do as an artist when you're pushing an era. The Eras tour just pushed the era, but it felt very quick. And it's like it has been a year. It feels like it's almost been longer because it was just like a couple months. It felt like
It's a weird way of looking at time. I don't really know how to evaluate it, but I'm curious to know what everyone else thinks. Well, thank you, Nick, again for coming on. I love talking with you. We always have the best time. So thank you for coming on. It means the world.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Love chatting about music anytime.
Yeah. Where can everybody find you if they want to
You can find me over on TikTok at Nick Palmai 1. You can find me on Instagram, Nick Palmai. I have a YouTube channel, Nick's my name. I haven't posted on there in years, but it's there. I used to react to music a lot. You can find me all over the place. I'm the loud one screaming in the car.
Love it. I love it. Well, thank you all for listening. For those of you who submitted questions, I really appreciate it. These were great, and it really contributed to what I think was a really strong conversation. So appreciate all of you taking the time to do that. And as always, if you're not already following the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, please make sure you do so. It means the absolute world to me. If you're feeling extra generous, throw Live from Mars a 5-star review. And I will see you all next week for another new episode. Bye, guys.
Hi, guys.